Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us at the Oxfordville Farming Conference for the session, The Dirty Truth About Pesticides and What We Can Do About It. As you might have noticed, I'm not Anna LePay. She is not feeling well and so is unable to join us this morning, but I work closely with Anna at Real Food Media, where Anna is the founder of Real Food Media and I'm a co-director there. So I'm happy to be stepping into her shoes and to learn alongside with the rest of you all about pesticides and what we can do about it. So we are joined by three incredible leaders, Stacy Malkan, Donald Ofoegbu, and Josie Cohen, who all three have been doing so much amazing work around pesticide advocacy and just working towards a pesticide-free future for all of us. So just to give you a sort of lay of the land for our hour-and-a-half session, I'm going to share a few words to set the context and then moderate a conversation with the three panelists. And if you have any questions at any time, please feel free to put them in the chat. We will answer some of them in this session, and we're also going to answer them when we move to the Zoom room at the end of the hour. So on to pesticides. So for decades now, science has been accumulating about the harms of pesticides for people and the planet. Last year marked the 60th anniversary of the seminal book Silent Spring by Rachel Carson, a powerful warning call about this toxic toll. And despite all that we know about pesticides, their use continues to grow. And many of the most toxic ones are still largely unregulated in most markets around the world. So we have so many questions, right? Like, why has it been so hard to take on the pesticide industry? What are the tactics that the industry has used to become so entrenched? And what can we do to take action and stay inspired? So we're going to explore all of these questions and more during this session. And our hope is that you leave today feeling more informed about the impacts of pesticides and industry disinformation and feel more inspired than ever to take action. So before opening up the conversation with Josie, Donald, and Stacy, I'm going to give a little more context. We know many of you are experts on pesticides yourselves, but we think this broader context is important to emphasize. And certainly for those newer to this discussion, this context setting is particularly helpful. So we're going to go over some terms. In this webinar, the term pesticide refers to a broad category of chemicals, all petrochemical based. That includes insecticides, herbicides, fungicides, and more. Globally, herbicides are by far the largest percent of pesticide use. Roughly half of all pesticides used globally are herbicides, about 30% are insecticides, and 18% are fungicides. And the remainder is all the rest, like rodenticides and other pesticides. So pesticide use went up globally by 80% between 1990 and 2017, while some regions in the world saw an even larger spike. Globally, the pesticide industry swelled to 84.5 billion in market size in 2019 and is growing at roughly 5% a year. A few key highlights about pesticides and their impacts. So we increasingly understand the impact of pesticides on the environment. They don't discriminate between pests and beneficial insects. And recent studies have shown just how toxic these pesticides are in the environment. A peer-reviewed study, co-authored by Friends of the Earth, for example, found that U.S. agriculture has become 48 times more toxic to bees and other insects since the introduction of neonicotinoid insecticides 25 years ago. And a recent meta-analysis shows that pesticides harm the living organisms that are the basis of healthy soils. All of this comes on the heels of the first meta-analysis of global insect declines, which found that 40% of insect species could face extinction in the coming decades, largely because of industrial agriculture, monocultures, and pesticides. But these pesticides don't just harm soil and insects, right? They also harm humans and human health. Decades of studies show that pesticide exposure is linked to cancers, asthma, neurodevelopmental disorders like autism and ADHD, and to neurological diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. Exposure is also associated with reproductive disorders like infertility and birth defects, and metabolic diseases like diabetes. Emerging science reveals that dozens of pesticides are endocrine disruptors, meaning they can mimic, block, or scramble our hormones. Farmers, farm workers, and pesticide applicators, and those living in communities next to farm fields are particularly impacted. Farm workers can be exposed at levels hundreds of times higher than consumers' exposure to pesticides. Farmers, farm workers, and their families have higher rates of acute poisonings, cancers, birth defects, asthma, infertility, autism, and other neurological and reproductive effects. In December 2021, 4 researchers published the results of a systematic review estimating the number of unintentional pesticide poisonings and fatalities globally. The conclusion was startling. An estimated 44% of farmers, farm workers, and pesticide applicators experience at least one incident of acute pesticide poisoning on the job every single year. And you can learn more about pesticides, their use and their impact, and the just released Pesticide Atlas that we'll link to in the chat later. So I know that I just ran through a bunch of information, but we're going to, hopefully that all can settle with y'all. I know that this is not a new topic for most listeners here today, but now we're going to go on to the panel discussion. So Josie, Donald, and Stacy, as you hear those figures, which is the context for our conversation today, the case for coordinated, strategic, bold, urgent action to reduce pesticide use has never been more clear. I'd love to have each of you introduce yourselves and share why you're personally invested in this issue. So if you can tell us a little bit about what you do and what inspires you to do this work, that would be fantastic. Starting with Josie.
Thanks so much, Tiffany. And yeah, thanks so much to everyone who's online tonight. My internet's been a bit dodgy, but hopefully it's going to last. But my name's Josie Cohen. I'm head of policy and campaigns at the Pesticide Action Network, otherwise known as PAN UK. We were founded actually soon after the Bhopal disaster, which is still considered the worst industrial disaster in history. So we were founded in sort of the mid-80s. We're part of a big global network. PAN UK was founded around 1985, and we were actually started by Oxfam and the trade unions, who were working on pesticides really from a human health perspective at that point, not really from an environmental perspective yet, but didn't feel like they had the technical expertise to go up against the industry, because that's one of the things to debate on pesticides back. It is such a technical topic. So PAN UK was really founded as a think tank, but to house kind of toxicologists and agronomists and people with expertise in pesticides that you'd normally only find within the industry. So instead of being focused on selling more chemicals, we were focused on pesticide reduction and reducing harms. We're a small organisation based in Brighton on the south coast of the UK. We have international projects where we help cotton farmers end their pesticide use, mostly in East Africa, and produce organic cotton and sell that onto the market. We also work with national regulators around the world, and then we work on the international chemical conventions like Stockholm and Rotterdam. I actually lead the work in the UK. So we work on 3 main actors. We target UK supermarkets and try and get them to reduce pesticide-related harms linked to their global supply chains. We work with the national government trying to push for pesticide reduction. And then we also have a big campaign called the Pesticide-Free Towns campaign, which is already 100 councils, local authorities in the UK stop spraying pesticides on towns and cities, because actually most people think it's just an agricultural issue, but these things will be sprayed on the pavement outside your house to get rid of weeds. So that's still really common. So they're the different levels we work on. I mean, for me, why am I passionate and why have I chosen to work on such a specific topic? I think pesticides sit at like the intersection of so many topics that I'm passionate about, whether it's food, access to food, health, environment, workers' rights, women's rights, corporate accountability, corruption. You know, pesticides kind of sits at the nexus of all of these topics. And they actually enable industrial scale agriculture. Monoculture would not be possible without pesticides. And again, the solutions to me seem so within reach, because agriculture is not really part of the free market. You know, it's subsidized heavily all over the world, which means this is our money. This is public money that is paying for this type of harmful agriculture. And then finally, something that really inspires me is that the alternatives do exist. We know what the alternatives are. And there's millions of people out there, many of whom I'm sure are in the audience tonight, who are already practicing those alternatives and producing food and managing land in a way that's sustainable and healthy. So the alternatives are out there. We just need to build the political will to adopt them. So I think for me, these factors all combined kind of inspire me to get up every morning and think about pesticides.
Thank you for sharing that. I just love what you said, how pesticides sit at the intersection of so many things, and it can be it's like a vehicle for injustice to like actually enter into someone's body, um, which is just really, yeah. Um, Donald, if you could share a little bit about yourself and why you are personally invested in this issue, and also what you do and what inspires you to do this work.
Tiffani, good evening from Nigeria. My name is Donald Ikenna. I am the program coordinator for the Heritage Ball Foundation, Abuja, Nigeria. And most of my projects span around sustainable agriculture, sustainable energy, and the likes. And I think what really drew me to join the campaign around pesticide actions in Nigeria and hopefully the whole of West Africa was as a result of it started with headlines, I mean, there was a news headline in Nigeria in 2018 where we lost about 270 people in Benue State. Benue State is like the food capital of Nigeria, and when that incident happened, nobody related it to pesticides, until a year after. It was then related to pesticides, and we started tracing that issue. And then the food rejection. Nigeria has been having a food export ban in the EU between 2015 and 2017, and this is a threat to basically agricultural diversification. And then 2020, it actually came home where I almost lost my wife to diarrhea after she ate a local delicacy, a cassava, a local delicacy with cassava. And that incident really shook our family. And that was when we realized she was actually pregnant 3 months for my baby girl. And it's all kind of like connected. And, personally, it was a big threat to my family. And that's why I kind of like joined this campaign. And whenever I read of the threat associated with pesticide on infants, I can't help but think of, possible effects it may have on my daughter. And I really don't think we should take this lightly. And it's a big threat to our food sovereignty. Here in Africa, a lot of indigenous species, plant species are all fading away. And so for me, it's really personal, apart from just the job. And hopefully, we're glad that the whole world is really rethinking our food system. So basically, that's why I kind of enjoy what I do around pesticides and hope that we start to make the necessary change that the world really needs. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, Donald. Stacy?
Thank you, Tiffani, and I'm thrilled to be here with all of you. Thank you so much for the work that you all do. I first learned about the pesticide problem when I was working as a reporter in Colorado in 1998, and the county government at the time proposed to spray herbicides all around the bike paths, and people were upset about that. So the county called a meeting, and 200 people showed up, which was really shocking in that small community. But people were upset, and so the county officials started the meeting with this very slick video that showed about the huge problem of weeds in the high country and sort of the safe, happy solution of pesticides. And then when the credits rolled, that it was produced by Dow and DuPont and Monsanto, and people just like, there was yelling, there was crying at that meeting. As a reporter, I thought, like, this is fantastic. I have a great story. So I spent weeks interviewing the county, state, town government officials, and really clear to me that they had no idea what the health effects were of chemicals that they were proposing to spray everywhere where kids ran and played. And I said at one point to the town manager, by the way, are you spraying on school grounds and in the parks? And he said, oh, yeah, we just spray Roundup. You can buy it at Walmart, so it must be safe. And of course, now we know glyphosate-based Roundup is linked to cancer, and the World Health Organization's cancer research program considers it a probable human carcinogen, as well as linked to many other health and environmental problems, butterfly declines, and many human health problems. So that was my first introduction to, I later found out that the chemical companies were very instrumental, of course, in creating the weed programs and funding the weed programs at universities. So I started to see how much they frame not just the science and policy, but the whole way we think about food. And later I went from there a few years later to work for an environmental group in DC that tried to reduce pollution in the healthcare system, called Healthcare Without Harm. So I worked with doctors, nurses, and scientists trying to understand and communicate about what environmental health science was telling us about how the chemicals in, chemicals that we know to be toxic in the rivers and the oceans are also in our bodies, in our blood, our urine, and even found in the bodies of newborn infants. And a huge amount of science showing that those chemicals contribute to many health effects, as Tiffani was talking about, including cancers and the rise in hormonal cancers particularly, and also reproductive health problems, fertility problems, obesity. I also myself have many of us know young people, family members, loved ones dealing with these health problems. I had infertility this whole time in my 20s, my 30s. I struggled with that and never knew why. That story ended with a happy adoption of my wonderful son. But I wouldn't wish that on anyone. Thank you. And recently, one more bit of history on my story, I started to focus on pesticide industry disinformation, how they run their disinformation campaigns. And that started about 10 years ago. I worked on a ballot drive in California. We tried to label genetically engineered foods, which GMOs are also a key piece, as Josie was talking about, of the industrial food chain, the monoculture pesticide, tame the land framework. We had huge public support for that campaign, 70% almost, consistent public support, a yes for labeling, until 1 month before the vote, when the Monsanto-led campaign spent about $45 million in the course of a month. So more than $1 million a day on a blizzard of just lies and confusion. And it was overwhelming and it was confusing as to why so many people who seem disconnected from the companies, professors, academics, Nobel laureates, were carrying the messages of Monsanto. So after that, I was a media director of that campaign, and my boss, Gary Ruskin, and I started US Right to Know, kind of out of the question of how did they do that? How do those campaigns work? So in 2015, Gary started filing public records requests at universities across the country to try to figure out what's happening there behind the scenes, who's getting paid. And we found tons of information about academics who claim to be independent, who are getting directly paid by Monsanto, ties to many front groups. And I will talk more about that in our findings. And as we've tried to make sense of the massive amount of money and effort that goes into telling the story that we need this destructive system to feed the world. So I'm motivated to put some truth and light on that. So I'm very happy to be here with all of you to do that today.
So that report that you and Anna LePay and Kendra Klein worked on, Merchants of Poison, would love to hear more about it, just how similar the pesticide industry is to the oil and tobacco industry and its use of disinformation tactics and like reaping that confusion in order to shape policy. So can you share some of those findings?
Sure. Yeah. So we've worked on this for a long time. It is based on, I'm going to read the title of the report, Merchants of Poison, How Monsanto Sold the World on a Toxic Pesticide, a Case Study in Disinformation and Science Denial about Glyphosate. So we focused on glyphosate, although these tactics are across the board, all the pesticide companies and all the pesticides. We know that. But we focused on Monsanto, now Bayer, and glyphosate because we have so much information about what happened behind the scenes. And that's because 100,000 people are suing them in the United States because either they or their family members have non-Hodgkin lymphoma, which is the specific cancer that the World Health Organization Cancer Panel linked to glyphosate. So during those trials, hundreds of thousands of pages of corporate documents came out, and our investigation also added many more internal corporate documents that people thought would never see the light of day. So we poured through all of that to try to put together what's the playbook that they use to sell the world on glyphosate and keep their pesticides unregulated. And so 3 key things I wanted to talk about: manipulating the science. For decades, the record is clear that Monsanto manipulated the record and the regulatory studies findings on glyphosate through a whole range of tactics. Ghostwriting studies that would not have Monsanto's name connected with them when they were published. Looking for friendly scientists to tell particular stories, to deal with what they called vulnerabilities in the science, to paper over concerns, not disclosing things properly in journals, cooking up studies to try to distract and deflect from health concerns that were showing up in the science. We also saw many strategies to deny and attack science. So groups that were funded by Monsanto, currently funded by Bayer, led attacks, personal attacks on scientists and journalists who raised concerns about glyphosate. And this has been written about. There was an award-winning Le Monde series about how Monsanto did this and how they tried in every way to basically destroy the United Nations Cancer Research Panel. So this was like real desperate tactics to save a very profitable pesticide. And then the third thing I wanted to mention is the many third parties that are seemingly independent, but speaking directly the talking points written by Monsanto and its talking points. So those are like sciencey sounding groups like Academics Review, Genetic Literacy Project, the American Council on Science and Health. These groups, by the way, are often at the top of a Google search of anything you search about pesticides and cancer. You'll find them dominating Google News. I think that's very concerning. Professional organizations like the American Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, farmers groups, beekeepers groups, even like prestigious scientific organizations like the AAAS, people affiliated with those groups would use the cover of the groups to speak the points that we can see from the documents clearly tie back to Monsanto and its PR campaigns. And just one specific example I wanted to mention about Europe, and I think Europe is playing an incredibly important role, and we'll talk more about that today, in regulating where other countries won't regulate, where the United States certainly won't regulate. And it really matters. So therefore, there's huge lobby campaigns trying to stop Europe from passing a current very important proposal, which I hope Josie will talk about, the farm to fork proposal to reduce pesticide use. But one of the things we saw in the documents was a campaign called Freedom to Farm. So Freedom to Farm was purported to be grassroots farmers that were against bans on glyphosate. So there's a document from Fleischman Hillard, which is a PR firm that worked with Monsanto, showing the Freedom to Farm operation was 7 PR firms. They had 39 full-time employees. And then in the document, they talked about 56 trained operatives in the field. So 95 paid people recruiting, purporting to be farmers, recruiting farmers, trying to look like a massive farmers organization. This is the kind of stuff they do that environmental groups don't have the manpower, the woman power, the money to counter. So I think, what we're trying to do is, as I said, shine light on it and just like challenge these tactics, these people. And I do think that the truth is more powerful than all that. That's what gives me hope.
Oh, thank you, Stacy. Even though I hear this and know this a lot through work, but it still is mind-boggling to me, sort of how nefarious these industries can be and what all they can accomplish with the billions or millions to billions of dollars that they've put behind it. It's wild. So Donald, and regarding the tactics that Stacy just talked about, what have you seen on the ground? You're muted.
All right, thank you very much. So what we have on ground here, it's not too different from everything that Stacy has spoken about. The anti-science strategies of the agro companies, it's really evident. We have like a Crop Life Nigeria sponsoring a lot of research, sponsoring a lot of government trips. So you have government officials, and these trips comes as capacity building support for the Federal Ministry of Agriculture, capacity building support for the food safety agencies, take them abroad and show them there's so many different farms and tell them how safe these are. And then there's this sudden build-up of a new narrative of how we cannot feed ourselves or how we cannot grow food without chemicals. And it's funny because there's this, I don't know, forgetfulness. We kind of like forget or a new narrative of how agriculture began in Nigeria. So the history of agriculture in Nigeria is kind of like shallow and distorted. So when you think of history of agriculture in Nigeria, everybody just thinks of farming with hoe and cutlasses. Nobody is actually thinking about how sustainable is actually the food system, how was the environment then, how did the chemicals come in and what has been the multiplier effect. That part of history is missing in all of these narratives. So the new narrative is immediately you're getting your agricultural seed, you must get chemicals. The other one that comes in, it comes in terms of like regulatory support from agro companies. So a lot of agro companies, they put in a whole lot of money in terms of training for farmers on safe pesticide use. And Nigeria has been going through a whole long series of research talking about a decline in soil fertility. A lot of the forest fertility is always blamed on the farmer, and then we blame it on the number of rainfalls, the erosion. Nobody is actually pinning it down to the falling of trees, the tillage from monoculture, the application of fertilizer. So all of these things are kind of like missing. So that narrative has actually really, really messed up a whole lot of things. So when you hear organic agriculture in Africa, in Nigeria, it looks foreign, it looks strange, but organic agriculture, agroecology, these are traditional farm systems that our ancestors used to do. Our ancestors were tree huggers. They farmed in between trees. They understood the relationship between nature, humans, the environment. They understood all of this, but today we hear organic agriculture and then it looks strange. We hear agroforestry, it becomes strange because there's a shift in that narrative. So agriculture is no longer looking attractive simply because a lot of the expenses or the cash that it's used to run the system is always exported, but nobody looks at this. And for the government, it's also about we're creating new jobs. These agro companies, they're coming into Nigeria, they're bringing bumper harvest. For them, it's just job, 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 job. And we also don't blame them because, I mean, the government officials are also our neighbors. They don't know so much. Government is largely underfunded. They can't take up research on their own. So anybody whatsoever, even the devil, if the devil brings in a whole lot of money and say, I would give you capacity support to create more jobs, they will take it both hands because they're constrained. So a lot of the agro companies have actually used these so-called methods of we're offering support to the local government, we're offering support to farmers, and once the issue of pesticide abuse comes in, we simply trace it down to the farmers are not responsible, they're not applying the pesticides the right ways. And a whole lot of research you get to see on pesticide use or pesticide abuse sponsored by the corporations. The quickest, the first recommendations you would see is farmers are not following the labels. So when you make a statement like that, that is not the Nigerian reality. This is not the African reality. A large percentage of the farmers are smallholder farmers. Over 70% of them are women. Most of them are in rural communities. Most of them don't have access to schools. Most of them are not English literate, so they don't even understand what you're writing on your label. Most of them don't even know what is the active ingredient. What does it really mean? So when you say, when you have a research that concludes and says farmers are not following the labeling instructions, for Christ's sake, the reality is that a lot of farmers cannot read. So these are some of the things that the companies, after training the government, food safety agencies, they come out to the public and say farmers are not responsible, farmers are not using these systems the right way, but these are not matching our reality. Another issue is, farmers are not using the safety equipment, but how many farmers even have access to them? Our economic reality is that a lot of farmers, not even just farmers, the minimum wage in the country does not even allow you to actually afford protective equipment. So even if a lot of farmers don't have access to them, a lot of the manufacturing companies are also not investing in them. So should all the farmers say we have enough money, we want to buy protective equipment, we can read the labels. The fact is that we don't have enough of those protective equipment around. So a lot of the research do not match the reality on ground. They don't attend to the needs of the people. They don't consider the economic literacy of the people. They don't consider the economic reality of the people. So it's the research, the government support, the position of the companies as regards to safety. As far as Nigeria is concerned, it's a fallacy. It is not practical. It's a mirage. So these are some of the tactics that they've used. A lot of support, and of course they don't come with their company name. So now we see Crop Life Nigeria is a Nigerian NGO that is supporting the government. So all of these things come with disguise, like wolves in sheep clothes. And unfortunately, the governments are quick to jump on this sort of support. Academic and research institutions are also quick to take up this support because for them, it's more research, is more travel allowances, is extra money for them, basically. And they keep these guys on their paycheck through supports and per diems and allowances simply because they do not know any better. A lot of them are also victims. Everybody's a victim within this context, apart from those that work in this company. Well, maybe a lot of them are also, but these are some of the things we basically see on ground. And then we see a whole lot of lobbying, legislative lobbying in the countries. We see captures, regulatory captures, where you actually see, Nigeria does not have a legislation for the regulation of pesticide, and the first legislation that was put forward was sponsored by Crop Life, and we know all the members of Crop Life. And now this bill is supposed to be a bill that is supposed to ensure safety of Nigerians. But a quick summary of that document is an ease of doing business legislation. It's about cutting time for registration. It's about allowing as a rubber stamp method. It's about allowing bribery, because the legislation which they are supporting is saying government officials can accept bribe. It's not even putting any of the enforcement agencies in that legislation. So it's a whole lot of lobby. So no, but they don't come up and say this is for business. They actually come and say this is for the safety of Nigerians. So you really need to have time to sit, read, and pull out these facts. Because the truth is, in a country where the literacy level is really poor, nobody reads. You accept any help as they come. So it takes a few Nigerians who will take this on themselves, cut out time to really sit down, read through to spot some of these things. So a whole lot of the campaign strategies come in disguise. They are wolf in sheep clothing. And a lot of governments kind of like grab on it, not because they want their people to die, but because they also think this is the right way to secure the lives of people. But these are some of the methods they use. And unfortunately, a lot of academians are jumping and biting this. A lot of farmers are still reluctant because they actually cannot afford. Even the companies are not providing tangible, help or support that the farmers really need. So, but these are some of the guises that actually play on ground here in Nigeria.
Thank you so much, Donald. Thank you so much for all of that, and it's given me a lot to think about. Josie, how have you seen these tactics, the anti-science, the manipulating of scientific methods? How have you seen those tactics in your own organizing work?
Yeah, so very similar, and we come across both kind of that insidious, like drip, drip, drip of narratives, the way the industry pushes them out, and then we also come up against them directly. So we see both. Actually, just before I jumped on this session, I got an email from the mayor of a small town in the UK telling me, just to quote, explaining that glyphosate is not hazardous to humans or animals. And citing the fact that it's approved in the UK till 2025 as proof of that fact. So it does work. I remember a couple of years ago going to meet with the DEFRA chief scientific advisor. So DEFRA is the Department for Environment and Food and Rural Affairs in the UK. And he was just absentmindedly clicking a Bayer pen that he'd obviously been given by a company representative. It was me and the Friends of the Earth meeting him, and yeah, it was just like, anyway. But yeah, we sit in government workshops, and the industry is treated as an equal stakeholder, and they say to us, well, you're one stakeholder, they're another. And we say to them, but they're motivated by profit. Do you not distinguish between these two types of kind of people giving you opinion? And they don't. So, but they're very, very clever about it. It was interesting that they go after scientists, because actually they're the ones who use the term science-based. So they'll push for science-based regulation. And they kind of use that to contrast, I suppose, what the anti-pesticide movement is saying, and to paint us as kind of hysterical environmentalists or like crazy people, but they call everything they do science-based. And in the UK government has sort of admitted, similarly as on the international stage, we had the Convention on Biological Diversity, COP, just before Christmas in China. And COP tried to bring in a pesticide reduction target. And originally it was looking like it was going to be something that could be really interesting, 50% reduction by 2030 globally, which should be absolutely massive. And the industry pushed and pushed and pushed, and they finally got the wording changed to be risk reduction. So what that means is you're not actually reducing the volume of pesticides being used. So they're not making any less money. You're not using any less chemicals. But don't worry, we'll reduce the risk. So they have these incredibly kind of sneaky ways of coming in and really destroying any efforts that you're making to make progress. And just one last example, the RSPB launched its first ever report on pesticides. That's the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds, which is one of the biggest environmental conservation organisations in the UK. Published its first report on pesticides about all the harms that pesticides are having on British wildlife. And in response, a new organisation was started. I encourage anybody to go and look at their website. It's called the Science for Sustainable Agriculture. And it's just about, feeding the world with a growing population. And it all looks very innocuous. And it uses words like science-based and genetic innovation. And then you look at who's listed on their advisory board. They're all from the industry or linked to the industry. And it's so sneaky. And even organizations like, I'm really shocked, but one of the biggest cancer organizations in the UK is called Cancer Research UK. They have a page on their website telling you that gardeners cannot get cancer from using pesticides. And that just shows, I think, quite how far the kind of tentacles of the industry is able to reach.
Wow. That's, again, wild and so nefarious.
Can I just respond to that and say, two of the people who successfully sued Monsanto were home gardeners. A couple, both of them got non-Hodgkin lymphoma, and they got a $2 billion judgment. So the jury thought that pesticides caused their cancer.
And you know better than me, but as far as I'm aware, none of the successful cases yet have involved farmers. They've all been kind of groundskeepers and gardeners, and so it's all been outside of agriculture, actually, which is
interesting. Josie, you mentioned earlier, or maybe you mentioned earlier about one of the narratives that the pesticide industry uses is that they're needed to feed the world, and another one that they use that they are safe and well regulated. Which we've seen it's not true. So what are some effective ways to counter this messaging that they push out? Donald?
I think a simple answer to that is what Stacy said about just shine a light on it, basically. For most of the narratives, you need to have like evidence-based counter narratives. And in our own case, it's actually looking at how much pesticides do we have. So we've done a whole lot of couple of research to kind of like look at the pesticide used in Nigeria vis-a-vis our export markets, how many of them are allowed, how many of them are banned, what are the health implications, and then just throw it out, not just to the direct stakeholders, but to the public, the whole media, and then show basically the health hazards of this. And the narrative, apart from it being evidence-based, has to speak the language that the people relate to, basically. So it's really not enough to say that pesticides are dangerous, but for the farmer, what does this mean? What does that particular brand of pesticide he's using, what does it mean for his health? So for us, it has to be a lot of evidence-based, and then the alternatives. A lot of the alternative is you cannot farm without chemicals. So we started the campaign by, first of all, looking for who are the agroecological practitioners, who are those organic practitioners, can we see the yields, can we see the crops, and then a whole lot of farm yields, a whole lot of field tours, take farmers to those farms and then they see. So farming agriculture is practical. You cannot speak theory to a farmer. So if you tell a farmer you cannot farm without chemicals, he asks you what is the alternative. So we need to be able to show that alternative, show organic agriculture work, show agroecology work. We need to be able to show the size, show the farm. So the alternatives need to be seen. And so part of what we've also done, it's also look at those people that actually promote biopesticides, doing agroecology the right way, and then the traditional farm practitioners. So we have, I think one of the panel discussions, earlier discussions was talking about bridging the intergenerational gap between farmers. So we've seen a lot of elderly farmers. They teach us how to preserve beans, how to preserve the farm yield. We need to be able to provide such histories on how these things are done. So these are just one of the ways we build that narrative. And then the other way is just like Stacy said, shine the light. So for the legislation that it's been done, what are the flaws in that clause? What's the problem with the legislation? We're able to sit side by side, identify all of the gap, identify the clause that are kind of like leading towards corruption, identify the sponsors of the bill, basically just shine a light and just throw it all out for the public to see. So it's really a counter narrative that shows the alternative, a counter narrative that shows the implication of having a weak regulatory system, a counter narrative that stresses the need for Nigeria to protect its indigenous species. And if the norm continues, it's almost like a scenario. So if the norm continues and we continue to, business as usual, use as much pesticides as we want, what does this mean for our economic gain? Because the government seems to be more interested in how much money you make. So what does it mean if we continue this whole monoculture, high use of pesticide? What does this mean for our international revenue gains? It's definitely a decline because the whole world, it's shifting away from this. So we have a whole lot of evidences. We need to present evidence of rejection of our food. So we get letters from EU, we get letters from the Chinese, we get letters from the Japanese, where they're actually rejecting Nigeria's food exports as a result of the use of pesticides, as a result of the use of certain chemicals. So we gather all of those evidences and throw it out there and say, this is what we're talking about. So even if we don't care for the life of Nigerians, you should care about the loss you're going to secure in terms of your agricultural exports. And then, of course, the next thing you need to show is the health incidents. There's a huge trend. Once upon a time, in Nigeria, Africa, if you hear cancer, we say it's a white man's problem. But today, if you don't have cancer in your family, you don't have a family. So show people this figure of rising cancer incidents, infertility issues, and the rest of them. So all of these things are traced to our food, and then we show these evidences. If you use glyphosate, what's the health implications? And then references must be there. So these documents we put together, the different research, we did one with some agroecological farmers and the rest of them, and they are undebatable, they are undeniable. So these are just some of the ways to deal with the narrative, and we must always bring it to the human elements.
Yeah.
Because the guys that are working for life, they are Nigerians, they are humans. So you take it back home and how it affects them. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Donald. And that was what you just said about today. If you don't have cancer in your family, you don't have a family. That gave me chills. But yeah. Okay. So going back to the twin narratives from the pesticide industry about how their products are safe and well regulated and also needed to feed the world. Josie, what are some ways that you use or ways that you know of to counter this messaging?
Yeah, I mean, I really agree with Donald. We need to keep putting the evidence of both the harms and the alternatives. But I think in this world we're living in, like, facts aren't enough. I often feel like on the left, we sort of think, oh, we'll put the facts and the evidence out there and then we'll change their mind. And the right doesn't seem to really work like that. They kind of work more on changing hearts and minds, not necessarily through truth. So while I'm not suggesting we sort of turn to the dark arts, I do think there's something around sort of going beyond the facts. And I do think, like, the good news is that I do think I know we're on the right side of history, but also we've got a generation coming up who are increasingly anti-pesticide. We've got a generation who think more about where their food comes from, who are desperately worried about the nature and climate crisis and insect declines, who value green spaces and nature, and are kind of, we're moving away from this neat and tidy mindset where like beautiful is like everything manicured and clipped, and into a place where people actually appreciate wildness. And young people are more focused on social justice. So I think we need to kind of latch onto these existing movements, whether it's Extinction Rebellion's focus on the climate crisis, or, you know, the Me Too movement on women's rights, or the stuff around, you know, social justice, and really show how pesticides is part of that, not keep it in this little box where you work on it as a kind of niche topic. I mean, the other thing that we've really found is that we need to tell positive stories. You know, the world is very negative and scary and heavy at the moment, but there are actually so many positive stories in this space, you know, much more than the climate space, I would say. So whether it's about urban areas going pesticide free and people noting kind of pavement plants, you know, we had a whole thing in the pandemic where people were spotting weeds on the street, putting chalk around them and naming the species, and then they'd post that on social media. You know, there's so many farmers who are already discovering new ways to farm with nature and doing really inspiring things. I think we need to get those positive stories out there alongside the harms, obviously, but just to try and inspire people to act, because the world is a pretty scary place right now.
Thank you, Josie. And Stacy?
Well, it's difficult, right? Because, you know, I marvel at how the pesticide industry's whole sort of current frame is where you need us to feed the world when there's, you know, 9 billion people, but they don't currently feed the world. And small farmers mostly feed the world. And the industrial agriculture system doesn't, because it's designed for profits and not for feeding people. And as long as that's the case, that will be the result. So it's difficult. And we did a financial analysis on just the 10 groups, front groups that were named in Monsanto PR documents specifically for glyphosate defense. And their budgets were in the tens of millions a year being spent on this disinformation. So it's an industry unto itself. And I think, just back to the shining light analogy, we're trying to, I think it's important to call that, to research people, to look at what their background is. We have a series of fact sheets at US Right to Know about the front groups, about their ties to Monsanto, about the academics. I think academics and universities are a key piece of why the pesticide industry gets away with disinformation far more than tobacco and the oil companies. And I say that because they're challenged by journalists far less. It's not as understood. They stand for science, as Josie said, despite attacking science, because they have so many academics and universities in their corner, because those folks are making a lot of money also on the system. And universities have really come to depend on agrochemical industry funding. And Donald was talking a lot about that. Yeah, researchers, the agricultural research throughout the world is mostly focused on a narrow set of technical solutions, GMOs and pesticides, and profit-driven areas of inquiry. I think that's really concerning. So challenging all that, but we're trying to be positive, right? So I think, what works for narrative is the personal stories, like the human stories, the stories of vulnerability. Donald, you're talking about your wife and what she went through. Like, that's something that I'll remember, people will remember. And also what you said about if you don't have cancer in your family, you don't have a family. I mean, that's heartbreaking. But those heartbreaking stories are what moves people, I think, to understand, because we all have the experience of seeing that things are not right and not well. And I think also telling the stories of healing and health. So many people finding incredible health and healing through changing their diet to whole foods and organic foods and pesticide-free foods, and communities of people building up around that, and young people, as Josie was saying. I think that's all incredibly hopeful and important. And it's a big reason why the industry is struggling so hard, why they have to put billions of dollars literally into disinformation in order to keep their business models running, and still they're struggling. So that's somewhat hopeful. And I think also the triumphant stories of agroecology and communities that are finding that it's not only healing the land, but helping to heal communities and give farmers a living wage, and can focus on equity and not just on the profit piece that the industrial agrochemical behemoth is focused on. And one other piece of work I want to mention in case I don't get a chance, but we've looked also a lot at the Gates Foundation and the programs that they're pushing, particularly in Africa, to expand industrial agriculture in ways that empower and benefit corporations. And it's been stunning to me how non-responsive they are to groups across Africa that have been faith leaders, agroecology leaders. They just don't even respond to letters and pleas and requests for meetings. I mean, it's amazing. And they're really shaping a lot at the policy level in Africa and also at the global level with the World Health Organization. So that also needs to be challenged. And we have a section about the Gates Foundation at usrtk.org, following specifically the agriculture and food programs.
Thank you. Just a quick note to people who are listening or tuning in. We're going to transition to another room in about 10 minutes for Q&A, and I hope you do move there with us because obviously the panelists, Donald, Stacy, and Josie, are so knowledgeable and have so much more to share. So yeah, we look forward to seeing you there in 10 minutes, but we still have a final question here. So we're going to focus on solutions. So the farming practices shared by many Oxford Real Farming Conference devotees that don't rely on toxic chemicals and produce abundant food. Like those are some of those amazing solutions. But how do we promote those solutions in the face of industry influence? And can you each share some strategies and ideas? And I'm going to start with you, Josie.
Thanks, Tiffany. Yes, there's actually lots of solutions. I mean, sort of, if we look at the regulatory system, I think we really need to break some key ways in which the industry controls agriculture. So, for example, I don't know how it works in Nigeria and America. I suspect it's similar, but here we have the agronomists, so the people who are paid to advise farmers, earn commission from selling chemicals. I mean, whilst you have that sort of situation, farmers rely so much on advice. You're never going to be able to really sort of tackle pesticides. So we need to look, what are those intervention points, and we need to kind of target them and try and break industry influence. We also need to make sure farmers and growers are supported to reduce pesticides. I mean, being a farmer is a hard job. If you want to be rich, you don't become a farmer. In the UK particularly, it's hard. The weather's changing. They don't earn a lot of money. So we need to put in place the support to help them reduce pesticide use. So that's from government and supermarkets, and that's financial support, but also technical support, access to independent advice. Peer-to-peer learning has been shown to be really important. Enable farmers and other land managers to come together and share best practice with each other. It's shown that farmers listen to other farmers. So in the UK, we have a real problem that the National Farmers Union, which is the only trade union for farmers, actually is very closely linked to the pesticide industry. So every time we try and ban a pesticide, like they ran the glyphosate is vital campaign. But in recent years, we've had the creation of the Nature Friendly Farming Network. We've got people like organic farmers and growers, and they're actually uniting farmers and growers to come together and share best practice. And that is just so important. I mean, in terms of individuals who aren't in farming, I mean, personal behavior, we have a guide to gardening without pesticides on our website. I hope no one's still using pesticides at home. You can use your buying power to support agroecology and shops that are doing more and pesticide reduction. You can campaign at your local level to try and get your council to stop spraying pesticides on streets and pavements, and also your national leaders. But I think ultimately we need to broaden out the amount of people the type of people who care about this. In the UK, food and farming and the environment sector are the least diverse, the whitest sectors in the charity sector. And that's a real problem. We need to bring more people into loving nature and having access to nature. We need to broaden out the agroecology and environmental movements to be more diverse, because if people don't learn to love nature, why would they care about this topic? So I really think we need to be bringing more people into the debate and broaden out the group of people that are working on this stuff.
Thank you, Josie. And Stacy?
That was all very excellent. I don't have a lot to add, except I want to say that I think the European Union is incredibly important, and the role that EU plays in policy. because they'll go where no one else will in terms of regulating harmful industries. And I don't see it happening without that. And just a specific example from years ago when the European Union regulated hazardous substances in electronics. Now that was like known highly hazardous substances, lead, cadmium, 30 years of science. Nobody questions those substances were harmful. They're used in electronics, an incredibly innovative industry that every 2 years things are faster and better and smaller, but not less toxic, because there's no value in the market for that until the European Union said no more. 30 hazardous substances, I think it was, banned. And US companies were like, we don't have to do that, do we? Their consultants were like, well, if you want to sell to the 450 million people, in EU, yeah, you have to do it. Similarly, in the US, when the EU tried to pass the REACH chemicals legislation, the industry said, well, we'll just go stop it. And their US counterparts were like, that's not how it works in the EU. Like, the best we can do is water it down. And they did with the help of the US government. So I think innovation toward safety is not going to happen without government intervention in this industry. So I think what Europe is trying to do to regulate pesticides now is incredibly important, and regulate glyphosate, which they may. They're going to look at re-registration next year. So it's an important moment to shore up support for health and life in the EU.
Thank you, Stacy. And lastly, Donald, if you could share some strategies or ideas to promote farming practices that are healthy, not only for the planet, but for people as well.
Okay, I think Josie and Stacy has covered the most. But for my own additions, it would be on the narrative. We need to be able to start to craft out narratives that really speak to our humanity and our persons and identity. For Africa, food is culture, and what happens when we have a current farm practice that kind of like erodes all of that, all of those foods, indigenous food species, all the way? What's the implication if we have to start importing our local okra and the rest of them? So we need to build local narratives that shows or reflects how food is our culture, food is Africa, agroecology is Africa. Taking care of nature, it's our humanity. I mean, you can't separate a tree and us. So we need to be able to build this type of narrative, and that narrative needs to be crafted by everyone. A lot of time, the campaigns have been running on silo, one leg by civil society. But how do we get in more traditional leaders, more religious leaders, more celebrities to talk about this, more medical practitioners to talk about this? So we need to bring in more of these social influencers. They are cultural, they are garage park leaders, they are the bishops, they are the pastors in the church, they are the big general overseers. Africa is really religious. We need to bring in even the chief doctors, the juju men and the rest of them, because they use herbs and leaves. We need to bring them in to also carry this sort of messaging. And then we need to use soft skill, really soft human relationship skills. I strongly believe that even the big crop life members, the Monsantos, they are humans, they are not monsters, but they seem to be blinded more by the profit. And the minute everybody shifts towards organic, a lot of these companies would switch into production of biopesticide, organic inputs, and the rest of them. And then, of course, we'll start another campaign. But we need to be able to relate to that, their humanness. They are still open to cancer. They are still open to respiratory diseases. They have wives, they have sisters. So we need to be able to still reach out to them. I still believe we can reach out to them, because at the end of the day, everybody is still on planet Earth, not Mars. So the narrative is very important. How we craft out this narrative is about, even if we want to be selfish, we can craft out narratives that still speak to that selfish nature of humans. Eat healthy food, it's for your own health. Grow healthy food in your kitchen, it's for your own health. Then be human enough not to sell those things that will destroy people's lives. And then we could support each other, basically. So one of the campaign strategies we use here in Nigeria is we don't blame anyone. Even when CropLife comes to our meeting and the rest of them, while we'll tell them you are actually the bad guys, we still tell them you're Nigerian, and you still want to eat safer food, So why don't you go back and tell your members to invest in agroecology? We talk to development partners, the GIZ, the USAID. We tell them, look, if you're going to give us developmental support, it has to be through this. And good enough, a lot of government officials have been responding positively. The Pesticide Council bill that is sponsored by CropLife was actually pushed through the Ministry of Agriculture. So when we shined our light and showed all the weaknesses and said, look, this is sponsored by CropLife, these are the members of CropLife, so you cannot have our markets being controlled by big international agro companies. The ministry came back and said, oh, well, sorry, we don't know. And we never, we didn't kill them. We didn't tell them, oh, you're bad, you're trying to destroy Nigeria. We said, we understand your challenge, we understand your constraint. But if you're going to remove the influence and the support from the agro companies, then you have to be ready to sit in there and offer your own support. So we try to be as human as possible, carry everybody along. So the narrative of brotherhood, we are together, we understand your interests, we understand your challenges, we know you want to make profit, but can you make this profit some other way? And then always put forward our reality. Our reality is that a whole lot of food comes from women farmers. A whole lot of these women farmers do not have access to this. Just basically speak to the human in every human being, and you get results from that. So basically, I'll just stop at that. Thank you.
Thank you. That was amazing. Thank you for that reminder that other people, even if they work for CropLife or Monsanto, are not enemies. They're also humans as well, and are affected by the same issues that impact us. So yeah, thank you, everyone. I know we're going to move into the Zoom portion, which is the Q&A. So we hope to see you all there. And thank you again, Stacy, Josie, and Donald.